Well, good morning, everyone. I'm so sorry I can't be there with you. It's exciting that you guys get to be in class. It really stinks that I can't be there. Um, Hope you're not too worried about me. I do have very mild symptoms right now, stuffy nose and a mild fever that's coming right down with ibuprofen. Um, so, yeah, not fun, but let's get into Chapter 9. I'm going to get you a test over Chapter 8 when I can. Um, I think I'll make it open book again because it's been so long since we've been in person and things are just crazy and uh, yeah, I'm sure that's how y'all are feeling too, right? Well, this is a good chapter. I hope you learn a lot from it. Powers of Congress. This section is going to be over the enumerated powers. If you remember, that means the powers that are listed in the Constitution very clearly. There's nothing implied about these. The Constitution says Congress can do this. And we are still talking about Congress, the legislative branch. And if you go to Article 1, Section 8, it lists the different powers that are all spelled out for Congress. So let's go ahead and look at them. First section talks about, I guess I should say, Section 1, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1 talks about financial powers. And I pulled it up on my phone. Feel free to go in your book too, wherever the Constitution is, a couple chapters ago. Clause 1, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1. The Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises, to pay the debts, and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States. But all duties, imposts, and excises shall be uniform throughout the United States. So the government has the power to tax. Specifically, Congress has the power to tax. Remember, America is independent from England and not part of the British Empire, mainly because of unfair taxation. That was the number one issue at stake, and all the other issues that we had with England really did revolve around this central issue: unfair taxation, unfair representation that led to unfair taxation. So, of course, when writing a new government, the people are very concerned about getting taxes right. All taxes, all laws that tax people have to originate in the House of Representatives, not in the Senate. This really makes no difference at all because the Senate also has to vote yes on it for it to go. Does it really matter if the House of Representatives votes first and the Senate votes second, or the other way around? Not really. It does not matter at all. It is more of a statement. We're making a philosophical statement. The House of Representatives represents the people the most closely. It is the half of the branch of government that most closely recognizes every individual township and city in America. And therefore, they are the ones who are in charge of taxation. It says two reasons for taxes, and that is the public defense and general welfare. Provide for the common defense and general welfare. They have to pay all debts associated with the common defense. Wars cost a lot of money. There you go. Let me tell you, when you get that first paycheck and you see in the upper left corner how much money you earned, and then you see in the bottom right corner how much money you get to take home, and in between there's all the taxes that the government kindly took from you, it can be rather disappointing. It can be rather disheartening to say, wow, I made this much money, but I only take this much home. What? But, that's government for you. It mentions three different kinds of taxations. Duties means tariffs, which just means taxation on imported things. Excises means taxes on making things, selling things, buying things, and earning money. So it's like an economy tax, you might say. Anything to do with the economy, making, buying, selling, earning, those are all considered an excise type of tax. And then an impost. That is just a very vague term meaning tax, and they put that here probably just to be a catch-all, meaning anytime the government takes money for you, you could call that a tax. Here's an interesting thing. There are some institutions that are tax-free. Churches and any religious organization, like a religious school, like Wiscasset Christian Academy. We're not a church, but we are a religious organization, and therefore we are tax-free. We don't have to pay property taxes and that kind of thing. However, down in Florida, I knew a guy who was a former pastor of mine who was down in Florida, and even though they did not have to pay taxes, they did have to pay this fee. It was to help rebuild after floods, because there's so many hurricanes and things down there. So there was some kind of fee, and I forget what they called it, but they said everyone has to pay X number of dollars per acre or whatever. And it was not a tax. It's money that you have to pay for the government, but it's not a tax. Like, okay, so it's not tax deductible. I don't know. That was weird. I bet a Supreme Court case would rule that if you pay money to the government, it's considered a tax. So tax-free organizations should not have to pay for that, but oh well. Section 1, or Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1 does say that taxes must be uniform throughout the states. That's at the end of Clause 1, meaning no state should pay more or less than any other state. We're all in this together. It is very interesting that with payroll taxes, with income taxes now, you pay a different amount of taxes than your neighbors, probably, because the more money you make, the higher the tax rate is on that money. So you could argue that having different tax brackets is not uniform. Although, of course, people have argued that, and the Supreme Court rules that it is constitutional, because everyone in every state making the same amount of money as you pays the same amount of taxes as you. So it's not that Mainers who make $50,000 a year pay more taxes than New Yorkers who make $50,000 a year. But if you make $50,000 a year, you're going to be paying more than someone making $20,000 a year, and someone who makes $100,000 a year is going to pay more than you. So no, not everyone pays the exact same amount of taxes. Rich people do tend to pay more. So tariffs have been very controversial from the very beginning all the way up till now for many reasons. Tariff is a tax on imported goods, and how you implement that tax can really change the economy. If you tax imported goods like crazy, really high tax on them, then no one will buy imported things. Well, if no one buys imported things, then those countries that lost their trade with you, they're gonna do this tax war where they raise taxes on American things, and then America doesn't have business in their country either. You could do certain things like protecting American businesses, making people buy American by making it just too expensive to buy anyone else. You could make a deal with a friend so that this one country has very low tariffs, but that country has very high tariffs, which completely changes your economy. Tariffs are going to help American businesses, American manufacturing businesses. Tariffs are going to hurt American traders and merchants. And depending on how high the tariff is, the tariff might help bring more jobs to America, or you might lose more jobs than you make. If you save a couple thousand jobs in American manufacturing, you might lose a couple thousand jobs in American shipping industry. So it is a give and take there, and we have to be careful to make the tariff just right, not too much, not too little. Originally, tariffs were one of the major sources of revenue for the United States government. Back before we had income taxes, the two main sources of money were tariffs and selling Western land. And of course, we don't have any Western land left that we're willing to sell, and tariffs are no longer a huge part of our income anymore, which means we have to go to income taxes. We use these tariffs not just to make money, but to definitely influence trade. Here's a picture of America and China, and every once in a while we'll go on some kind of trade war or threaten a trade war where if one of us changes the tariffs even slightly, then the other side will threaten or actually change their tariff laws as well. And we have so much business with China that even just a few percent more or less can swing our economy by the hundreds of billions, more or less. So those tariff laws definitely do affect everyone in America, all our jobs. We also trade a lot with Canada and Mexico. They border us. We have borders with them. So of course, any trade wars between us and them really not good. Personally, I am usually in favor of more trade rather than less trade. Excuse me. I think the more competition you have in the marketplace, the better. So if the American businesses are competing with foreign businesses, that forces American businesses to do better, to do a better job for less money. With no competition, you can get away with bad quality equipment at bad prices. With competition, you are forced to do your best. So I am usually all for competition, but of course there are many major caveats there. For instance, if China is paying children, it's a penny a day, and it's basically child labor to make your Nikes, should we should we support that? Should we support slave labor in other countries? Of course not. That's a whole can of worms, and that's for next semester. Next semester we'll talk all about the economy and the implications of trade law. Tariffs were one of the major reasons that sparked the Civil War. Now, different people will tell you there are different reasons for the Civil War. The number one reason was slavery, and every other reason for the Civil War revolved around slavery. And tariffs impacted slavery. See, the South had a slave economy where the slaves grew cash crops like cotton, but other cash crops as well, like tobacco, and they sold that cotton mostly overseas. England was their major trade partner. And so they sold all their cotton overseas, and then those ships returned with manufactured goods. And when there was a high tariff, they would get, England would raise the tariff as well, and then they would get lower prices for selling their cotton in England because less people would be willing to buy it with a tariff. But then they'd also get higher prices for buying stuff from England. So it really was a lose-lose. The more you raise tariffs, the more it hurt the slave economy. On the other hand, the more you raise tariffs, the more it helped the northern economy with its factories and people they hired instead of enslaved. Because it forced more people to buy American things, which meant things made in the North. So yeah, the tariff and it steadily rising higher and higher and higher was definitely a problem for the South. And why was it a problem for the South? Because slavery. Because it hurt the slave economy. And were they willing to shift from a slave-based agrarian farming economy to a manufacturing economy? No, they were not willing to do that. They were kind of forced to. So clause 1 says Congress can raise money and taxes and spend it on the general welfare. What does that mean exactly? Well, Jefferson and Madison were for limited government, and they said this phrase just means that you're allowed to raise money and spend it on the enumerated clauses. Excuse me, the things that are necessary to complete your duties. I have a quote here by Jefferson. The laying of taxes is the power, and the general welfare the purpose for which the power is to be exercised. Congress is not to lay taxes ad libitum, which means freely, for any purpose they please, but only to pay the debts or provide for the welfare of the Union. In like manner, they are not to do anything they please to provide for the general welfare, but only to lay taxes for that purpose. So he says this providing for the general welfare doesn't mean you could write any law that you consider is for the general welfare. It only says you can tax for the general welfare, which is slightly different. Not a whole lot different, but Jefferson thought it was. Hamilton, on the other hand, was more for a more powerful government. And he said this general welfare phrase meant that we can tax and spend on whatever we want as long as it benefits America. This is a very broad interpretation. It is kind of a literal, though. It is a literal interpretation. spend it on the general welfare. General just means for everyone. So obviously you're not allowed to spend it on, one politician's house. That doesn't help everyone. You have to spend it on America. And welfare just means what's good for the people. So yeah, if you take it at its, plain sense, it means you can spend money on whatever helps the people. And of course, that is so vague on purpose that Congress really gets to decide, well, what's helpful and what's not helpful. But then on the other hand, you, the people, get to also decide what is helpful and what's not helpful, because if your congressmen vote for a law that you think is wasteful, you vote them out of office. And of course, Hamilton's more broad view prevailed. And today the government spends on a lot of things that I'm not sure are terribly helpful. American spending has gone through the roof. I mean, even this several trillion bill that just got passed, the infrastructure bill, I am all for infrastructure, but that price tag has given me sticker shock. Roads and bridges and whatnot, they are very helpful for the economy, and we'll see that more next semester. But oh goodness, we are spending a lot of money, and we don't have all that much money to spend. But in a very broad sense, yes, the government is allowed to spend money on whatever helps America. Clause 2 says that Congress has the power to borrow money on the credit of the United States. That simply means we're allowed to borrow money. It's not on personal credit. It's not George Washington borrowing money. It's not, Senator Jefferson borrowing money. It is the United States, the government. Not even really the government. It's the country is borrowing money. And we borrow money from American bankers. We borrow money from American individuals. At different times in my life, I've bought government debt. You're allowed to buy, I think that the lowest denomination they have is $100 notes. They might do 50. I don't know. We'll talk more about that next semester. But yeah, you're allowed to borrow money. Clause 5 says you're allowed to coin money, which of course also means paper money. I wonder if the government's ever going to make its own cryptocurrency. That would be interesting. I would think that this phrase saying that the government's allowed to coin money could definitely be applied not just to metal, but also to paper money, and then not only to paper money, but also zeros and ones, internet money. That would be very interesting to see if one day the government has its very own cryptocurrency. I will say, most money in America is not metal or paper. It's just zeros and ones. For instance, Bible Baptist Church pays me a salary. They do not pay me any quarters or nickels or dimes. They do not pay me any Benjamins. I get a note. You know what? We've even gone paperless. I don't even get a note. I get an email that says, this much money is now in your bank. And there was no physical money going anywhere. They just deducted zeros and ones from Bible Baptist and gave me zeros and ones. And that is actually the most common form of money. I don't know how much paper money is out there, but I would wonder if it's even, 25% of the dollars that are in circulation. Very interesting. Clause 6 says you're allowed to punish counterfeiters, and I can't remember if it was you. I think I showed the 7th and 8th graders some old money, pictures of old money, and on a lot of these colonial bills, on the back it says to counterfeit is death. The punishment for counterfeiting back then was hanging, and they were very serious about that. The Secret Service was actually formed to find counterfeiters. It was such a big deal. Whenever there's more, here's a question for the economy class again. Why doesn't the government just print out $20 trillion and hand it to the Chinese government? Or why don't we just add a few zeros to the government's bank account and say, oh, we're not in debt anymore? Because that would make the remaining money worthless. See, money is only worth something because it's kind of rare. If everyone had $1 trillion, would you work for $15 an hour? Probably not. You would demand billions of dollars an hour. If you were a trillionaire, would you sell a loaf of bread for $2? No, you would demand lots of money for that. So it would just devalue everyone's money. And that's the problem with counterfeiting. The more money is out in circulation, the less it's worth. And if counterfeiters are just putting tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars into circulation, it's hurting the entire economy. So it really is a big deal. Next semester, we will look at all the security measures modern money has, and there's some pretty amazing security measures that we have today that makes money incredibly difficult to counterfeit. So one big way that that taxes impacted America was trade taxes. When we're talking about the revolution, there's the tea tax and the sugar tax were some of the biggest taxes. They're all import taxes. And regulating our commerce was definitely a huge deal. So when the Constitution tells our Congress that they're allowed to regulate commerce, we got to do it right. Another thing that made us really mad at England was they said you're not allowed to trade with other nations. You're only allowed to trade with us, and that of course hurt our economy quite badly. So we need to make sure we do this right, or we're going to have another revolution on our hands. The Articles of Confederation wasn't allowed to regulate any businesses or commerce whatsoever, just no regulation. And we found out that was a bad idea. Just letting businesses do whatever they want, not good, because people are sinners. And when you let people do whatever they want, they're going to make bad decisions. So we need some rules. Maybe today you could definitely make the argument that there are too many rules for businesses today. Over-regulation is definitely a problem, but under-regulation definitely is a problem as well. So we go from England, way too much regulation, to America under the Articles of Confederation, no regulation at all. We have to find a happy medium. Clause 3 gives Congress regulatory power over interstate and foreign commerce. It says the power to regulate commerce with foreign nations and among the several states and the Indian tribes. Gibbons v. Ogden was a very important, very early Supreme Court case that gave or really upheld the federal government's right to regulate commerce. And what was happening was there's this river on the border of New York and was it going down to Maryland? I don't remember where it was going through, but river going through multiple states here. And New York said, if you want to have a steamship company ferrying or bringing supplies on this river, you have to get a license from us. But then other states were also giving licenses on their part of the river, and sometimes these ships would go up and down through state lines, and then the federal government also gave licenses. And so each one of these states and the federal government said, well, you have to buy a license for me. No, for me. No, for me. And it was a big deal. It was a big mess. So they went to court and said, well, who has the right to sell these licenses? And it was decided because it's not just in New York, because it is going through multiple states, that is the federal government's job. If there's a river only in New York, that's New York's job all the way. That's their business. But if it's going through multiple states, that is interstate commerce, that is DC. Congress is also allowed to wage war, to grant letters of marque. This is hiring privateers, which is basically like hiring a private navy, which we don't do anymore. We have a professional military. And also, reprisals means you get to decide what to do with enemies and their stuff. So if you capture an enemy ship, what do you do with the crew? What do you do with cargo? What do you do with the ship? Congress gets to make laws about that. Quite often, before the war begins, what America will do is called freezing assets, which means any bank account held by a citizen of the enemy nation is just stopped, no money in, no money out, and sometimes that property is seized. So, for instance, before World War II, we froze all German bank accounts, and we basically stole tons and tons of German ships and offices and warehouses full of junk, and used that money to wage war on Germany. Same thing with Japan. Other powers include naturalization and bankruptcies. Both need to be uniform. Naturalization is how to become a citizen. Bankruptcy is what to do when you can't afford to pay your debts. Citizenship is granted to everyone who is born in America, which that's been true from the very beginning. This is a very open method of citizenship. There are plenty of nations around the world that don't do that, where it is rather difficult to become a citizen. In America, it is very easy to become a citizen, and we did this on purpose. We want all the people living in America to have a say in the American government and to have all the rights of an American citizen. So making it somewhat easy to be a citizen is really part of the American dream. Citizenship is also granted to babies who are born to visitors. If someone's on vacation in America and they have a baby gets citizenship. If someone is on a work visa and they get permission to be in America for 3 years or something, that's pretty common. Get permission to work in America for 3 years or 5 years at a time. They have a baby during that time. That baby gets citizenship, and they could choose to go back home. They could choose to stay here. Whatever, it's up to them. Citizenship is also granted to any children of American citizens who are born in foreign lands. So that is very lenient. That is letting a lot of people be citizens who might not otherwise be citizens. So you can claim citizenship because your parents were citizens or because you were born in America. And then Congress gets to write rules about how to make foreigners who move to America citizens. There's always been a waiting time. You have to live in America for so many years. And that time has changed: 5 years, 7 years, 10 years. There's usually requirements. I know today there's a requirement that you take a civics class, that you learn English, you take a civics class, you pass a basic American history and government test, and then do a pledge, like a Pledge of Allegiance type thing. Congress can, by law, decide what races and ethnicities are allowed to come to America. And if you know anything about the American government and the American people, especially in the past, they haven't always made very good laws. And there have definitely been times that the Congress has used these powers in a very racist way. Sometimes it's very overt, sometimes more covert. So what this typically happens is by making a quota. You're allowed to send, 10,000 people from this country are allowed to come into America per year. 2,000 from this country are allowed to come to America per year, whatever, things like that. And of course, you can have higher quotas for the white nations and lower quotas for the brown nations. But then sometimes America has just banned certain nationalities altogether. Like, look up the Chinese Exclusion Act. And it was very overtly in the open, lots and lots of pictures and political cartoons I could show you. We don't want Chinese people in America. So 0 Chinese people are allowed to come to America. Not great. Today we still do have quotas, but they're not quite so racially driven as before. What about bankruptcy? If you don't have any bankruptcy laws, and we'll talk more about this next semester, don't worry about it. If you don't have any bankruptcy laws, you owe someone a lot of money, your business goes out, you might be paying off a debt literally for the rest of your life. And then any money that could be spent investing in your own business to get your business back up on its feet is now just going to pay your creditor, and you're going to be working minimum wage jobs for the rest of your life, and that doesn't help anyone. That doesn't help the economy at large. So they decided when you cannot pay your debts, your company can go bankrupt, and all the things that the company owns are divided equally among all the people that you owe, but you personally do not have to pay the debt that the company owes. It's called having a limited liability corporation. You are not responsible for your company necessarily. And that way you could start a new company and hopefully help the economy get better, rather than just being stuck with a bad company. Congress also wanted to make sure that all laws were uniform, which is why Congress is making bankruptcy laws, not every individual state. Because if you leave it up to the states might make different laws for their people and for outsiders. And they might, Maine might make laws that are easy on Mainers and hard on people from away. And they did not want that. They wanted all bankruptcy laws and financial laws to be fair and even across the country. Here's the mail, it never fails, it makes me want to wag my tail. Did you see the three guys from Blue's Clues who were on the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade? That was fun. So Congress has the ability to run the post office. And Hamilton was dead set that this was going to be a huge moneymaker for the government. That like selling stamps and stuff would make the government so much money that we would not have to raise much taxes at all because this would be a big money maker. Here's the thing. As America got bigger, people have more and more commerce, but also we have planes and trucks and railroads. People want to send mail across the country and they want to do it for cheap. The post office has been losing money for a very, very long time. Part of it was, up to a few years ago, you could send a letter from Maine to Hawaii for like 30 cents. Like it costs more than 30 cents to get it there. Yeah, well, you buy one stamp and it can go anywhere in America. Ooh. Like that's not going to make money. Another thing is there's competition, FedEx and UPS and all that. The post office has at different times been criticized as having a monopoly. Why should we pay the post office rates? How come they're the only ones who get to send the mail? But in reality, they're not. There have always been other people willing to bring packages from one place to another. FedEx and UPS are definitely the biggest ones today. But there are dozens of companies that will mail things for you. I mean, Amazon probably ships more stuff than the U.S. Post Office does. I would not be surprised if they do ship more than the rest of the Postal Service combined. There's always been other corporations who are allowed to do that. These competitors have often threatened the post office, not directly, but not threatened like I'm going to get you, but threatened like, hey, everyone's using FedEx and no one is using the post office, and the post office is going out of business. That often has forced the post office to change, usually by jacking up its prices. A problem with that is that companies like FedEx and UPS, they will go where the money is. So if there is a small town in the middle of nowhere that doesn't get much business, FedEx might not want to ship there. But those people need the mail. Sometimes rural people are way more dependent on mail than city folk because city folk can go, walk to the store, but rural people might not have any opportunities. Farmers often need to get stuff in the mail that they have no access to otherwise. Medication for their livestock, seeds in the spring, tractor parts when it breaks down, that kind of thing. The post office has to, by law, service everyone. So if they go out of business, that's going to be a big problem for whoever, FedEx just doesn't feel like servicing. Big question that we don't have time to think about today, but how has the internet affected the mail? I will tell you, when I was a kid, we got stacks and stacks of mail all the time, and a lot of it was spam. It's junk mail. Some of it, a lot of it was very important. Today, the vast majority of my communication is electronic and not physical. I have not written someone a physical letter in a very, very long time. The only physical mail I give out are like birthday cards. And these days, what you do is you sign your birthday card and then you just hand it to the person. So I don't even send them through the mail. So I don't use the mail very much sending. We buy a bunch of stuff online and Amazon and stuff. And so we receive a lot of things in the mail. Not so much information, though. We don't get information or give information through the mail. We do it electronically. It's way, way easier. I will say, every year there's people who come into school from a different school or will go to a different school, or there's people graduating, going to college, and records have to be exchanged. Either we get records or give out records. And it used to be you mail stacks and stacks of paper. And today I could go click and email it all. Save the planet, save a few trees, go paperless, right?